Dan's Bar. Today we are making a drink for which I have no backstory. None. I found it on a website. It's from townandcountrymagazine.com, of which I have no idea where it came from, but they've got a really nice list of a whole bunch of bourbon recipes, or bourbon-based cocktail recipes. And this one is called the Exene, E-X-E-N-E, and it sounded like it was tasty. So I decided that we're gonna make that today and see how it turns out, and if it's good, awesome! And if it's not, I don't care, I'm probably gonna drink it anyway. Yeah, I have nothing else to say about this, so let's just go ahead and get started. The Exene, wherever that name happened to come from, has 2 parts bourbon, 1 part Aperol, half part lemon juice, and half a part honey. This is lemon juice that was freshly squeezed yesterday, so fear not, still fresh enough. And by yesterday I mean whenever the last video came out, because these are filmed, never mind, we're good. Let's just go ahead and make a cocktail, shall we? We're gonna go ahead and put in 2 parts of our bourbon into our shaker and go from there. I'm using a old log cabin bourbon. This one has got a little bit of a honey nose to it already, a little bit more spicy. It's already got the honey and the kind of flowery notes, so I think it'll work well with this. We're also gonna be doing 2 different kinds of bitters, 1 orange and fig, 1 cardamom bitters. Cardamom's a little bit out in the left field here, but it calls for tiki bitters, which I don't have, so I'm substituting out for these instead. I think of tiki as a little bit more fruity, a little bit sweeter, a little bit more kind of having a grass skirt on, swaying in the breeze, and maybe a little lei made of flowers. So I thought a bourbon that had more of the honey, more of the floral notes would contribute well to that profile, so that's why I chose this particular whiskey, or bourbon to be specific. And just for those that were curious, whiskey is a category of bourbon. Strike that, reverse it. Bourbon is a category of whiskey. Not all whiskeys are bourbons. All bourbons are whiskeys. Whiskey also contains scotches, ryes. It's just based on the grain bill that it happens to contain. I have no excuse for mixing that up. That's something that I've known for a long time. We're gonna, in addition to our 2 parts of bourbon, we're gonna put in 1 part Aperol. This is gonna give us a little bit of a sweet, a little bit of a bitter, a little bit of an herbal flavor to complement our our bourbon. What I have heard is that this cocktail is a really good one for people that don't usually like brown liquors. Because it's got the Aperol, it's got the honey, it's got the sourness from the lemon juice, it is kind of a nice balance between a bourbon cocktail that's traditionally darker, more bitter, and a sweeter cocktail that does have more of the sweetness, lighter, fruity notes in it. So from that perspective, I think it might be kind of a good one to introduce people to bourbon that haven't had it before. Now, technically it calls for a ½ an ounce of a honey syrup, which is honey mixed with water that's melted down. I'm just gonna put in a little drizzle of honey, and that will just do without having to do all the pre-work of melting down the honey into water. It's probably not gonna mix quite as well, but we'll just have to give it a nice good shake and make sure it gets all incorporated, because a cold honey does tend to crystallize, which causes it to not mix with other liquids, but if it is agitated enough, it will be distributed properly throughout the drink. By the way, honey, if it ever does crystallize to the point of not being useful, you can always just throw it in the microwave, warm it up a little bit, and the crystals will dissolve, go back into a liquid, and honey will be once again delightful and good to go. That's why some of the oldest found still edible foods are honey. Because the way that honey is structured, it is highly hydro something. Basically, anything that's water-based that goes inside of it, the honey molecules pull the water out from that thing, so it kills any microorganisms that happen to get near the honey. So it will last for a very long time without ever spoiling, because you never get the microorganisms that would spoil it to be able to live in that honey, even though it is a highly sugary content. So dribble of honey, ½ an ounce of lemon juice to complement that. All sorts of little factoids sprinkled throughout this. I had nothing to talk about, so I'm just sprinkling factoids, and you're learning whether you want to or not. Yeah, that's right, that happened. You're welcome. We're gonna put in some bitters now. This is a Sycophant bitters from Crude Small Batch Bitters, which I got for Christmas last year. Orange and fig, which I thought would go well. A little bit of orange because we want to give it, well, orange goes really well with bourbon, first of all. So I thought that combined with the honey would give it almost an old-fashioned-ish note, while still having all the delightfulness of the Aperol and the honey and the lemon as well. And then I'm going to put in just a little bit of the cardamom bitters. Cardamom bitters are really, really good. They mix a couple cocktails just absolutely fantastic. However, it will become the flavor in the cocktail. It's very easy to overpower everything else with cardamom. So I'm just going to put in a couple drops, maybe 4 or 5 drops there. And I think that's going to be more than enough. Cardamom is a flavor that it's used a lot in Norwegian kind of pastry cooking. It's not sweet. It is kind of herbal, but it has a very distinctive flavor that you really can't find anywhere else. I've got Norwegian background in my family, and so the krumkake that you have is a Norwegian cookie that is fantastic and has a lot of cardamom in it. So lots of good memories for me associated with this, which is one of the reasons that I like to include it, because it brings back those memories. If you have different flavors that bring back memories for you, by all means include those. Make these drinks yours, make them the way that you want them to be. And with that, I'm gonna go ahead and give this a shake, and we will see after closing it fully this time. It was bad. I'm still finding little spots of sticky stuff on the ground from the whatever. We'll give this a shake and see how it turns out. Alright, I'm gonna call that sufficiently chilled, and we'll go ahead and strain this into our coupe. I'm doing this in a coupe rather than on the rocks because I felt like it. That's it. No other reason. Just cause. Alright, ooh, it's a nice pink color. I mean, Aperol, I suppose, will do that. I'm surprised the bourbon didn't give it more of a brownish color. But that's quite nice. Alright, the ever important taste test. Let's see what we got. I can see how somebody that doesn't like bourbon cocktails would really enjoy that. It's got all the bitterness from the Aperol and the sweetness from the honey and the sourness from the lemon that makes it almost seem like a, not a spritz because there's no champagne or fizziness to it, but it's almost like an Aperol spritz in a certain way. It is actually really good. And frankly, the bourbon is almost completely covered up. So use a bourbon that doesn't have a whole lot of flavor, or one that's fairly sweet that's going to contribute to the rest. But like if you did this with the Maker's Mark, man, this would just be a very sweet drink that someone that doesn't like bourbon-based cocktails, I think they'd really like it. So yeah, if you've got someone that doesn't like dark brown liquor-based cocktails and you want to have them introduced to some, give this one a try. It's a solid option. Yeah. Well, I hope everyone's staying safe, having fun practicing their cocktails and doing all those things indoors that you're supposed to be doing. And until we meet again, happy drinking. Cheers.